think that I had, a 36 exposure roll of pictures of this thing. And I didn't take a picture. Toby had a camera. He didn't take a picture. We never had a thought of taking a picture of this thing. Never crossed our minds. But I think that's part of that mental control. But I think they had to make sure that I didn't, go down to the National Enquirer and sell 36 rolls of UFO film and, embarrass the United States government.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. That's what I think is the whole purpose of everything. That's what I think.
Well, don't forget, they were and still are in denial of UFOs. Just because you have the Navy, saying, oh, we have the videos are, definitely unidentified flying objects, but they're not saying they're coming from out there in space. I'm going to tell you another real quick story. Good friend of my father was an actor, James Gardner. You remember Rockford Files?
Oh,
Maverick?
Yeah, sure. I know who James Gardner is.
Yeah.
Yes.
My dad met him in Korea while they were waiting to be discharged and come back home, and they became really lifelong friends. And I didn't even know that. When I was a little kid, every summer this guy would come for a week, and my dad and him would take off. Occasionally my dad would go to California. One day I realized who he was. I said, "You're the guy that plays Maverick." And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, then we became somewhat friends because he was friends with my dad. I said,
Sure.
what? I was really infatuated with Ronald Reagan. And this is when I was older. I said, is there any way you can get me in touch with Ronald Reagan? And Ronald Reagan was president at the time. And he goes, well, I can do that. Ronald Reagan had a show once a month for young people. You could call up and ask the president a question, and he would answer it or try to. Well, I never called it, but I got a phone call from the White House. And they said, Ronald Reagan would like to talk to you on this show. And that was fine. And I asked the question, he answered it, and I thought, gee, I'm happy now. I talked to Ronald Reagan. About a week later, I get a phone call from the White House. Here's Ronald Reagan. And we talked for maybe 10, 20 minutes. And I was really concerned. I can't remember my age at that point. I was really concerned about the Soviet Union because in the newspapers, they were talking about, doomsday and all this stuff, nuclear and all this stuff,
Sure.
exchanges. And I said, Star Wars was trying to get going. And I said, will Star Wars protect us against the Soviet Union? And he goes, well, I don't know about the Soviet Union, but it'll protect us against them out there. And he slipped out and said that, and I didn't even think anything about that for about 20 years later, what he said, out there.
Well,
he didn't say over there. He said out there.
Out there.
Out there.
1987, I believe, is the year that he gave his address at the 45th session of the United Nations, where he said, "What if we faced the threat?" I think how fast our differences would vanish if we were suddenly faced with a threat from an alien source. And that's when he made that famous statement. And I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? And he said that in 3 different speeches over the span of his presidency. And man, that just speaks volumes. What he said to you, and what he said in front of the United Nations, yeah.
Well, I think we are being visited. Again, what you went through, you had to go through. Boy, the time is down to like about 10 minutes. How did it affect you? Did you at that point decide not to stay in the Air Force? Is that and is that maybe what made you go into law?
I never intended to stay in the Air Force. My goal was to get a college education and then go to law school. So that was the plan from day one. But what they did was, I wasn't hypnotized. Now, that drug brought back these memories, but I wasn't hypnotized. But that major was certain that I was, because he asked me to raise my hand, and it didn't move on its own accord. He asked me again more forcefully, "Terry, raise your hand, raise your right hand." And I raised my right hand of my own volition, and I knew that I wasn't hypnotized. And at the very end of the thing, he says, "Now, Terry, this is the most important. I want you to tell me, you like photography, right, Terry?" And I said, "Yes, Brad." And he says, "And you have a nice camera, right?" I said, "Yes, Brad." And he says, "Did you take any pictures of it when you and Toby saw it?" And he referred to it as it. And I said, "No, Brad, not a single one." And he says, "And did Toby take any pictures?" And I said, "No, Brad." And he said, "Have you lied to these agents in any way?" And I said, "No, Brad." And he says, "Terry, I'm going to take away all those ugly memories, and I'm going to take them away from you right now." And I thought, like hell, I don't want to give these memories up. Even if they are ugly memories, they're my memories, and they belong to me, and I'm going to keep them, And I'm glad I thought like that, because, if I had let him suppress all of this junk into my subconscious, who knows how it would have manifested in alcoholism or mental illness, or I think I did the smart thing by resisting, surrendering my mind to this guy.
I think you did.
And that was it. I got out of the Air Force less than a year later and resumed my life.
I got to ask
or
you,
18 months later. Yeah.
I got to ask you a question, because I had one time sodium pentothal injected into me. And I had nightmares because of that. It was something that it lasted for years. I mean, not the sodium pentothal, but it opened up a lot of memories in my life.
Sure
memories
did.
I probably didn't want to, but I would get flashbacks. And when I did a lot of research on sodium pentothal, for example, I found out it was a derivative of basically LSD, and it can cause flashbacks. So that's why I was asking you, what type of drug they gave you, and if it ever caused you to have any flashbacks.
It caused me to have terrible nightmares for 40 years, and I still have them, I mean, my kids knew all along, Dad had screaming nightmares once or twice a year. And not only that, I have intrusive thoughts where I'll be thinking of something, concentrating, writing, doing something, and suddenly visions of this ship will just pop into my head, and I have no control over it. And then I got to, shake my head and try to get back on track. And the PTSD symptoms, I think.
Oh, yeah. Have you had the fear of being abducted again?
Well, let me say this. I got a 38 laying on my desk here where I do my work. I keep a high-power flashlight and a 38 next to my bedside table. I don't think it would do any good. I don't think it would stop. But you know what? I just feel better having it. And, yeah, I do fear that. And
have you been? Have you thought if you've been since you got an implant in you? Have you had any thoughts? Maybe you've been abducted several times since then, or maybe numerous times.
Yeah, I can send you. I don't know if we have enough time to tell the story, but
we don't. But you know what I want to do? I don't know if you want to, but I would like to bring you back on, like in December, and go over some other stuff about this, because I think the listeners would like to know. Now, we're on 22 radio stations. In December, we'll have another station. We have a large listenership, and we kind of cater a little bit more than a lot of shows in what we're talking about. And I really want to, find out more information. What do you think, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to get him back, and I know the listeners want him back to hear more, too.
Yeah, especially because we got Whitney coming up. And, and I
saw that.
And after he's on, I think people are going to be really hungry for more yet. And that's why I'll email you here tomorrow, and we'll set up another date to have you back on.
That sounds great. I just sent you an email with some photographs you'll find interesting.
Great.
Just 3. Ask Whitley about the white moth.
I will. Again, I want you to if you have a website, your Facebook, again, where they can find your book and all this. Give this information out. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can get it.
Yeah, my book is Incident at Devil's Den, and it's on Amazon, and it's in Kindle and a paperback copy with the X-rays and photographs and drawings, and then it's also in a audio book that's very popular, especially with truckers. I've got a lot of. I published it March 18th of 2018, and I've had 1,200 replies because my email address is in the back of the book, and I tell people, if you've had any experiences you'd like to share, contact me. And over 1,200 people have in less than 24 months. So there's a lot of people out there that have had this experience. And like I say, I'm not a therapist or anything, but read the book. People write to me and they say, you know what? I read your book and it triggered something. It triggered memories that I hadn't thought about, things I hadn't thought about in years. So, yeah, it's on Amazon. And also I have a Facebook page that has some really cool stuff on it. And that's just Facebook Incident at Devil's Den on Facebook. So go on in there, friend me, and I respond to everybody I can. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Gary. It's fun. I hope your listeners enjoyed it.
Well, I think you had a lot to say, and that's why I need to bring you back on. And we can cover a little bit more in depth, and about this topic. I think people need to know that there's abductions going on. And like you mentioned, evil. And that's what I hear on most of the people that claim that they've been abducted or have been abducted. They all say the same thing. Calvin Parker, right down the line, that they got nothing but an evil feeling about us. And I think that's what people need to understand. I don't think they give off orbs and they're here friendly to serve man unless they're serving man on a platter, at a barbecue.
Yeah. Shades of Twilight Zone.
Oh, yeah. Well, my friend, I want you to have a great week. And again, I'll email you tomorrow. We'll set up another date. I'll try to get you as close on after Whitney as possible.
Yes. And don't forget to ask him about the white moth.
Oh, I wrote it down. I'm going to ask him. Okay, my friend, you have a great one.
You too. Take care.
Okay, you take care, my friend. Night.
Bye.
So, there it is.
Yeah, that was some great stuff.